The government have set a target of 1.5 million homes by 2029.
So this 1.5 million target, for me, that was just a pure, let's pluck it out of the air, vote winner strategy. We're going to solve the housing crisis. No one actually asked them in detail, how are you going to do that in 4 years?
Think about how the Thatcher right to buy put us on a course of losing all those social housing. I think another thing that has put us on a course was when we were encouraged for everyone in this country to go to university as soon as they finished school. It was a terrible idea. Not everyone should be working in an office. It would be a terrible thing if everyone worked in an office. And now we're reaping the bad rewards of that policy because we don't have enough people in construction.
You know, the next wave of millionaires is going to be electricians and plumbers and people in construction.
Hey UK property people, we'd love to have you join us at This Property Life Networking. It's a no-guru friendly community. Our network gets a private WhatsApp group for daily advice and deal sharing, monthly online networking with live market updates and in-person events every year. Hit the link in the description below, join today and start building real connections with active property investors. Welcome to This Property Life podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Blaney, joined with my co-host, Nick Claydon today. And we're doing a bit of an extraordinary podcast today. It is in direct response to a Panorama programme that was broadcast on the BBC on the 20th of October, which we both watched and had a little internal rage, a little rant to each other, and just thought, you know what, it might be therapeutic for both of us to get our points across, but also just to address what the programme was about, which was essentially the government have set a target of 1.5 million homes by 2029. And is that a realistic target? Is it going to be possible? And we had lots of different perspectives around challenges that house building in this country face. And it was really just to talk about our personal interaction with that as well. So welcome, Nick. I mean,
Thanks,
you're
Sarah.
still human, aren't you?
I'm still absolutely fuming. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. But
still
I've calmed
raging.
down a little bit. But yeah, I mean, there were some things in it that were good. Generally, it was a bit simplistic and it was a bit kind of BBC, angle, which is kind of a bit skeptical, a bit, going to say left leaning. It's a bit annoying. I don't think they really got into the real meat of what the actual proper issues actually really are.
Yeah,
And
it's a little bit broad brush, wasn't it?
it was
And
very broad brush.
I mean, those aspects of it that were just there for a little bit of entertainment. I get
Yeah.
it because it's Panorama. It was a primetime TV time, and that's okay. But I mean, I think they rose some good points arose from it, and it's yes, we have a housing crisis in this country. We're not alone, actually. I think if you looked at any country, Germany, Australia, Spain, all of different places around the world, I think that there is, a general housing crisis, but they kind of focused on three things on the program as to why we are unable to really keep up with demand and why it's a problem. And those three things, they stemmed from Thatcher. In the 1980s, she did the right to buy, and we lost 2 million council homes. And those 2 million people were probably really happy because they got it at a massive discount. And we've all heard stories of individuals who have scammed that system and probably ended up with one or two council homes. There's always a few stories like that. There's outliers. But generally, we lost 2 million homes and then we've been playing catch up ever since.
A lot going on macroeconomically as well. I think, they didn't really touch on, why around the world are so many countries having similar kinds of issues. There's lots of macroeconomic stuff going on. But yeah, generally our issues kind of go back to that point where we lost all those houses and there was no real plan to replace them. As anyone will know that's ever tried to do anything planning wise, building wise here, there's a lot of red tape
And there's
to
even more red
overcome.
tape, isn't there now? And I think
Loads more.
that's something we've spoken about a number of times. It's a real thing of ours on this podcast that it's so difficult to do business in this country. I think if you looked at specifically at house building, it is building costs. There's been a massive surge on materials, energy costs for me, killing most businesses. through to manufacturing, you rely on it so heavily, through to just your hospitality and general commercial operations. Energy is absolutely killing everything for me at the moment. But equally, there was also mentioned that the supply of workers. So we, ever since Brexit and the pandemic, that perfect mix of terribleness, we've lost a lot of our construction workers back to, other countries and whatnot. And we've got an aging population of construction workers and not enough people going in at apprenticeship level because there's not enough apprenticeships because it's just too hard to take on apprenticeships. So there's all of that gubbins, which, if anyone's that regularly listens and watches this, me and Nick always ranted about that.
There's so many things. It's sort of like perfect storm of things that happened over the last decade or so. I would think from Brexit to through the pandemic and post-pandemic, that you can't just brush under the carpet. You can't just say, oh, that's not a big problem because it has been. Brexit has been, losing. I think back to pre-Brexit, mid 2000s. I was building and developing HMOs in Liverpool and Birmingham. My Birmingham builder was Polish, and all his crew were Polish, and they were great, really good, great job, reasonable price. But those workers are gone. That whole market is gone. Eastern Europeans have gone back. They've probably got better opportunities now back in their own countries, and we haven't replaced them because I don't know. In this country, are we encouraging young people to go out onto building sites and take apprenticeships? As Sarah says, red tape and costs means that taking apprentices on is expensive.
Yeah.
We're encouraging everyone to go to university. You don't need to go to university to go into construction. Every month on the second Saturday, we run an online networking session where you can meet other active investors face to face. And 3 times a year, we bring everyone together at live in-person events. Spaces are always limited, so if you want to be part of it, check out thispropertylife.co.uk/events and secure your spot today.
I think, that's another, if we think about how the Thatcher right to buy sort of put us on a course of losing all those social housing. I think another thing that has put us on a course was when we were encouraged for everyone in this country to go to university as soon as they finished school. It was a terrible idea because you didn't have to. You didn't
That was
have
Tony
to go to
Blair. That was
university.
Tony Blair that really,
Was Tony?
really, really did that. It's
Yeah,
like, everyone should go to university. Why?
yeah.
Really bad
Everyone
idea.
should do what their skill set is set up for and that they have a passion for and that they can provide for their families through. And actually, a lot of that was to go down the route of going into trades because not everyone should be working in an office. It would be a terrible thing if everyone worked in an office. And now we're reaping the bad rewards of that policy because we don't have enough people in construction. And those that are in constructions are getting older. The pay, we are now paying far more for those construction trades than we ever have. And that's great for them. But, I've got friends who are plumbers that are earning 500 or they're charging themselves out at 500 a day. And that's not unusual. And that's okay. They at some point they deserve that. But equally, if you've only just become qualified, you don't. And there's not enough.
It's kind of swung so far the other way, into everyone thinking they should go and work in office. And, I think there's going to be a big correction in that in the coming years. You're already starting to see it with, the big 4 accountancy firms, slashing their intakes by 25%, entry level white collar jobs. If with my boys, I'm going to be encouraging them, you don't need to go to university. If they want to, great. If they're going to do something that requires that, great. If not, it's like going to learn a trade.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
next, the next wave of millionaires is going to be electricians and plumbers and people in
It is.
construction. I really think that.
Especially electricians, if my recent bills have been anything to go by.
Yes.
But anyway, let's not go there. Okay, so we know that there's this 1.5 million target in the next 4 years.
I mean, so Sarah, all right. So 1.5 million houses. So how many have they built so far? They've been in power for a year and a bit. Do we know?
They're building something like 160,000.
Yeah. Okay. So hardly made any inroads. So this 1.5 million target. Now, for me, that was just a pure let's pluck it out of the air, vote winner strategy. We're gonna solve the housing crisis. We're gonna build 1.5 million houses. Brilliant, excellent. No one actually asked them in
How?
detail, how are you gonna do that? How are you actually going to do that? How are you going to make that happen in 4 years?
So I think what they would say is that they have overhauled planning. We're going to get to planning. Let's not
Oh my
go
God.
on that tangent yet. They have put more funding in, apparently, to building up the apprenticeship and college sector so that we can start to address that supply of workers. And I think there has been a change, from things I've heard anecdotally about that there is a bit more money in that area. But it's going to take years to get those people through and qualified.
But yeah, I just think, they just honestly are plucked out of the air. It's just like, there was no strategy behind how you actually going to do it. And I think you've got people that don't really know, I'm going to say it, they don't know what they're talking about. They've not been in this environment, and they just say, right, yes, we shall solve the housing crisis and pluck this number out of the air. I mean, they're not even going to get a third of the way to that. I can't see it. There's this, and no one's holding into account. This is what's really frustrating from my perspective. No one is really holding into account and drilling down into what are you actually doing and how are you going to hit this number, right? And when you say we're going to build 1.5 million homes, I mean, what does that mean? Homes can be anything from a static caravan to a mega mansion. What are you building? Because I don't know about where you are, so but if I drive around the central belt of Scotland, there's a lot of house building going on up here, but it's or I'd say like 80% of it more is 3, 4, 5 bed family homes that are priced somewhere probably between, well, around where I live or Edinburgh side, it's priced between like 250 and 500.
Yeah.
Is that what we need?
No. No. We need 1 bed and 2 bed
That's not
property.
what was sold off. What were the council houses that were sold off? They were 50s, 60s, 70s built housing stock. So at that time, 20, 30-year-old housing stock was probably 2 and 3 bed starter homes, right? And 2 bed flats maybe. That was a housing stock. And again, in where I am in Scotland, across the central belt, you see a lot of that stock, 50s, 60s, 70s built, 2 and 3 bed homes. There's lots of them, and a lot of them are now in private hands. A lot of my private buy-to-let stock is that.
It shouldn't have got to that stage, should it?
Shouldn't have got to
And
that
we can't go
stage.
back and rewrite history. So, but we can, I guess, learn from it. So, and I think another thing before we get onto the planning and what we do differently in that sector is that a lot of the time landlords are vilified for buying up all the housing stock, and it's our fault.
Yeah. We're
Honestly,
demonized.
we're
Demonized.
demonized. It annoys me so much. I think that landlords at the moment are actually, we are the solution, wrongly, we are the solution that government and local authorities turn to house all of the people that they should have in social housing. And then people get annoyed because money is being diverted into landlords' properties to house people that should be in social housing. And people are like, landlords are getting rich from this. We're literally just picking up the slack from what government should be doing. I want us to be a private rental sector to people that need a private rental home, not social housing. And I know that there's a lot of landlords that are making a lot of money out of social housing, but I honestly do believe that we shouldn't be doing that. We should be providing rental stock for people who are wanting just to rent for whatever reason, that they're not there permanently, that it's a transient thing, or whatever it is. Social housing should be the job of the government and not the job of the private landlord, which is what it is at the moment.
There is a need and desire for the private rented sector. There are plenty of people. I think this is what a large part of the population don't really understand. This thinks is like landlords are, as you say, making money out of people renting houses. Well, yeah, we're providing a service to people who want to rent houses. That's always been a thing. It will always be a thing because there's plenty of people that don't want to or can't buy their own homes. All right, that's fine. That's what we're there for as landlords. We rent houses, and I think a lot of the time, most of the stories you hear, or the ones that kind of come to light in the press, are the bad stories. Now, in
Um,
any service industry, there are bad stories. There's bad service providers and there's good service providers. You don't often hear about the good service providers, but you hear about the bad ones, and that's what's kind of, I think, you know, the press has kind of got hold of this bad landlord thing and made it about all landlords. There
yeah.
was something in the paper the other day about HMO investors on TikTok living it up in Dubai, saying about how they've rented their HMOs to the social housing sector and are making loads of money. This is how you can do that. It's like, that's the kind of thing that gets, on the Daily Mail. but that is probably 0.001% of private landlords doing something like that.
Yeah. So I think, my key thing on that is the government should be providing the social housing. They're not. Therefore, private landlords are having to do it because the council are like, we've got all these people, we don't know where to put them. Mr. Landlord, please, can you do this? And we'll throw the money at you. And it's just a sticking plaster, isn't it? And anyway, that's a whole different thing. We were going to rant on about planning and the regulations around planning because that was one thing that came up during the Panorama program. And I really enjoyed listening to Paul Cheshire, who was the economist on there, who knows an awful lot about land economics and Greenbelt and all of that sort of stuff. And he spoke a lot of sense. But for me, I mean, I listened to that and went, yeah, I'm with you, Paul.
Yeah, a lot of people talk about Greenbelt without probably really understanding it. The Greenbelt was set up particularly around London, the outskirts of London, to prevent the spread of urbanization. This was in like the 30s, back in the 30s, I think. So almost 100 years ago now. Yeah, the world's changed a bit since then. And there's this blanket you cannot build on Greenbelt land, and there's whole swathes of the country were designated as Greenbelt land. It's like, great. I'm great in concept, yet there's this narrative that, we're a small island and we're overpopulated and, there's development everywhere, urbanization everywhere. If anyone's actually flown, and I do this quite a bit, flown between London and Edinburgh, a lot of the country is like empty. There's a lot of emptiness in the country. Yes, we have a big population, but there's still a lot of land there. And a lot of, I think this is where you're getting, Sarah, is that a lot of this greenbelt land, the image you have in your mind when you talk about greenbelt is beautiful meadows and forests and lakes and trees and all of this. Great. But that's not what the whole of the greenbelt is it?
Yeah, and that's exactly the message that Paul Cheshire said on in the Panorama program was that Greenbelt is a very large term, and that there is lots and lots of land within that has no eco value or very minimal eco value, and it's very close to urban and good amenities, and he defines it as grey belt. And the government have listened and they've said, yeah, there's this grey belt and we can now have a slightly different type of planning around those areas, but we're going to give all the decision making to the local council. And I think that's where our frustration lies because we've been at the hands of those local councillors when we're trying to bring things in, and lots of our colleagues in the housing market have as well, where you're actually adhering to local policy in every single way, but it's being refused based on personal opinion of often, and I'm going to say it,
Say it.
white old middle class men.
Yeah. 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 And minority interest groups. So I was chatting to my planning consultant the other day. I was going to bring him on here, but I think his rant would go on for probably days. So probably won't. But he was telling me a story about a small developer. We're not talking about mega house builders here. We're talking about a small developer who's got a plot of land, putting like 8 houses on it. They're not a mega development, wants to put 8 houses on, still bringing houses, building houses, which is what the government says they want. And at the bottom of one of the gardens was discovered they had to do the surveys of various wildlife, and there was bats in one of the areas at the bottom of one of the garden. And it has taken years. And this developer's at the point of like, it's just this is pointless. And he's probably just gonna leave it and not build these houses and do something else with the land or sell it or just wait because of a minority interest group saying, "You can't do this because there's some bats there." And it's like, well, look, I love the environment, right? But at some point in this country, I think we have to make a decision on, do we want to build some houses? What's more important, building houses or worrying about a small population of bats? Because sometimes you can't do both. So what's more
Yeah.
important? Now, I might be, other people might disagree with this, but I'm thinking, well, I get it, but what's more important?
I
And for
don't
me,
I mean, I think as it was said on that program, it doesn't have to be one or the other, does it? I think there is an awful lot of instances where the two can be cohabitate with each other.
yeah,
So,
there was no actual real reason in this example. There was an actual real reason why I couldn't build. It's like you might disturb the bats. Well, might and are is doing things. And could the bats not like relocate over there? Would that be okay? But it's more the time it's taken to go through this process.
That I think is
Years,
the thing, because
years.
it is the time which will kill the deal because of cost of money, cost of holding,
Yeah.
you know, opportunity cost on what you're putting into that project whilst you're waiting for all of this. And that I think is the biggest thing. It's like, let's make this much slicker. Let's get it done quickly with consistent rules so that everyone knows where they are before they actually go into the process. Because at the moment, we've got these local plans, which, even residents are batting out local plans nowadays, aren't they? And saying, council, you're not allowed that local plan
Well,
based on, the group of boomers that don't want it. Gonna
when
be
you put it down to local level, you basically will get the NIMBYs and not in my backyard brigade come out. And I've
yeah,
had this from personal experience. I'm sure you have as well. I mean, we were doing a development that was within the local planning policy, is actively encouraged what our planning use was. And yet it had to go, it should have just been rubber stamp, should have just been, yeah, that's within policy. And that's what we're actively encouraging. Um, as our part of our local development plan that we've identified has been beneficial to the economy of Edinburgh. Brilliant. Okay. Rubber stamp should have been straight through. There was a local resident said, not in my backyard, you're not doing that because I live just opposite where what you're trying to do. Went round, gathered 200 people in the local area to write in and make a complaint or an objection, to the planning that we were putting through. And because of that, I had to go to committee. And at committee, it was rolling. I mean, we were literally rolling the dice because at committee, it was out of the hands of the planning officers, who, to be fair, should have just gone, this is irrelevant, which they really should have done. But because the rule says certain amount of objections, you have to go to committee, that's where it had to go. And at committee, you've got a band of local councillors who could be anyone who is a councillor, who might have absolutely no concept. They might even live in that area. I don't know that they didn't. They might live there and go, yeah, I don't want that in my backyard either, and can influence that committee to close that down. And it nearly happened. And
even though it ticked every single
even
box
though
on the
it
local
was, this
policy.
is what the local development plan says they want, right? We weren't trying to do anything that wasn't within planning policy. It should have been a rubber stamp, and we nearly couldn't get it. And it took a year, and all the costs associated with holding a piece of property for a year, but they didn't care about that. It's not relevant because they're not connected. There's no joined up thinking on this at all when it goes to local levels. You might have a government, central government going, we want to build 1.5 million houses. No, our development wasn't houses, but we want to build this local level. Yeah, we agree. It's in our local economic plan. We want this micro local level, actual on the ground councillors. No, I don't want that there. So we're going to
Mm.
make that really difficult. And that's what happened.
Yeah, and I think we've got lots of different stories on that. I've got one of exactly the same where it was housing, and I was trying to create 12 new HMO rooms, which were all very large, all up to standard, against the HMO standards guidance, all of that. And we had local councillors who were like, people shouldn't live in HMOs because they're slums. He hadn't even looked at the plans to see that these were very high spec, very large, back to brick, insulated, acoustically done. Everything was perfect about these HMOs. He hadn't even looked at the plans, but it was all based on an opinion that he had around housing stock, which didn't apply to my housing stock. And we got it through because the chief planning officer said, guys, you haven't even read it. You've not looked at it. This is against, they are completely doing what should be in our policy. And if you vote against it, they will win at appeal. And then, the council are financially fined, I think, in that instance when it's so clearly in the plan that they had to do it. Plus, we were given 12 new residences,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah. And our second one is exactly the same. But they went through it and they turned it down, even though they knew we'd overturn it at appeal.
Yeah.
And again, delayed us 4 months. And it was because of the next door neighbour was on the panel of the local community planning council, and that had the ear of the local councillor.
Yeah, so I think what our point on this is that there isn't consistency, and local and personal opinion has too much voice in
Yeah.
planning
It
decisions.
shouldn't. Yeah, I mean, it just there is no connection between the central government policy and what actually happens on the ground in a local planning decision. And that is why I can guarantee you right now, I'll literally bet everything I have on it, that they won't even get halfway to 1.5 million houses, nowhere near.
Yeah.
Because
And will be around, a lot of it will be because of planning. And I think that an important point was made in that program where the grey belt land could provide enough for 2 million homes.
easily, there's tons of it, and anyone that lives anywhere near Greenbelt land, you'll know areas that are technically Greenbelt that you look at it and go, "This is not like a lovely bucolic, you know, pastoral scene of trees and lakes and birds fluttering," and, it's not that. It's a bit of wasteland that happens to be within the designated Greenbelt. And also, another quick example is like a friend of mine, owns an industrial site in Staffordshire, previous industrial site, brownfield site, should be actively encouraged for residential use. So I want to put 140 houses on there, something like that. It has taken 8 years to get planning permission. 8 years on a brownfield industrial site to put homes on it. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
and
kind
I
of
bet that
laughable.
wasn't a back and forth on how much affordable housing or social housing was gonna be put in there. It was even before that stage
Before
of
that. Yeah,
should housing be put on there? Of
yeah.
course, housing should be put on, as long as the land is not.
It's a derelict industrial site, closed down industrial complex. Crazy. But so, all right, here's a question then. How is it solvable? Is it solvable? How would you solve it?
So oh God, big questions, Nick, from you there. I honestly, the planning has to be overhauled. And yes, they said they've done that. They
They
haven't.
have not
All
done it
they've
at all.
done
Not done it
is
at all.
said some words and then given the decision making over to local councillors. That's not going to change it.
No, it's not. And until they remove that whole local council element, nothing will change. Decision making has to be consistent. You have to take personal views and connections out of it. And it's all these kind of, in theory, this all sounds great. Build 1 million houses. The housing minister that was on, housing secretary that was on, Steve Reed, will say, yeah, but if it's decisions not made, I will, I can overturn it. It's like, really? So you're going to get how many applications are going to coming back to you to overturn? It's just not going to happen. The reality is that the actual decisions are made at a micro local level, and really until that is overhauled, and I can't see it changing. I really can't. It's got to be taken out of their hands.
Yeah. So the time taken, it shouldn't go for 8 years. Like that is, there
It's
need to be
ludicrous.
consequences as to why that happened, and
Yeah.
so that you're incentivizing the process to actually come up with a yes or no within a framework that isn't influenced by personal opinion of Dave the councillor, to actually get this moving. It needs to move far, far quicker, with efficiency. So there's so much good technology out there. Let's make that happen, as well. I think that's one of the key things. Take it away from the personal opinion of people who are ill qualified for the job, and make it a slick process that is far quicker, so that people can actually look at land, the smaller developers especially, because they're the guys that can move nimbly and aren't beholden to shareholders like the big seven house builders are, who own all the bloody land anyway under options or not. And that annoys me too, that we are held to ransom by the big house builders, who have options on pretty much all of our farmers' land.
It's not an easy fix. Not an easy fix at all. It's good. I like to see, the Panorama actually highlighting this, but I'd like them to go a bit deeper. I'd like them to have people on that understand it from a different angle as well. It'd be great if they had some small developers on there. We've, got a guy that we know who's a small developer in the Northwest. That's the kind of person you probably want to have on there that talks about this at a, you know,
Grassroots level.
grassroots level, what's actually really happening out there to really highlight some of these issues. But, you know, demonising of landlords has got to stop.
Yeah.
We're simply providing service, and we shouldn't be having to provide that social housing service at all.
Yeah. Do you
You
know
know,
another interesting thing from that Panorama thing? And I know this because I literally live a mile away from where this is happening. There was a lovely lady on there from the Wildlife Trust, Debbie, from the Solent and Wildlife Trust, and it went out on the Solent, which is opposite the Isle of Wight, between the Isle of Wight and Hampshire there. And she went out and was like saying, "Look at all this algae that we've got in our Solent, which is salt marshes, really important eco landscape. We've got all this algae, which is basically a result of nutrients, over nutrients going into the water, which often leads back to sewage. And people then say it's because we're building too many houses and we haven't got the infrastructure to cope with all of that. And we know what the water companies are doing." So that whole bit where Debbie went on about the algae in the Solent, that whenever that program was filmed, since it's been filmed and since it's been edited, it's actually come to light that there was a housing estate in the town that I live in, which was built 40 years ago. And there was however many houses, I think it's like 25 houses, that were basically not connected to any sewage. So when they flushed their toilets, it went straight into the river, which fed straight into the Solent, happening for 40 years. So no wonder there's a bit of algae going on there, because it wasn't about, house building here, there, and everywhere. It was because literally this happened 40 years ago and everyone's ignored it, not seen it, whatever the reasons. There's no way that someone hasn't noticed that in 40 years. It's just that no one's done
it's been
anything
ignored.
about it. We've now got a man stationed a mile from my house whose job it is to listen and see when everyone has a wee or a poo, and to pump that back out so it doesn't get into the river until the water company fixes it. He's there 24/7 and has been for the last 2 weeks. Thank God to the local residents who were doing the water sampling to say, "There's something really wrong here." And
Yeah.
finally it's getting sorted. But when we talk about nutrient neutrality, which is a big thing, and what that part of the segment of the program was all about, you've also got, actually, it's not about house building in the last 10 years. It's about the fact that we're dealing with rubbish like that from, house building from 40 years ago.
Yeah, because, there weren't the same standards back then, but now I think it's kind of gone almost the other way. We're now over regulated. There's so much regulation, so much red tape now
Yeah,
that it
but
kind of
but based
hamstrung.
on things that aren't actually accurate. So that whole neutrality thing is based on, "Oh, it's because of the building of houses." And sometimes it's actually not. Sometimes it's based on the fact that someone didn't do their job 40 years ago and actually connect all these water and soil pipes to the main drainage.
But that detail doesn't fit the narrative, does it?
It does not. It
Yeah,
doesn't.
and I think that's a big part of the problem is that there's this whole narrative out there, alongside the all landlords are evil, kind of narrative. It's all, house builders are the problem. It's like, are they?
Yeah, I don't think we've solved anything today, but it's been really therapeutic, hasn't it?
Yeah,
So
no, it's one of those things that's going to be impossible to solve. It's like, but what, as investors and developers, what do we do? The impact it's had on Carol and I for sure is that I mean, genuinely, we can't face doing our developments, can't face it. We would love to go and do, more of what we do. Genuinely, I just can't face going through that planning process again. It's we've rolled the dice twice and we've won twice. And if we roll the dice again and lost, it's just not worth the risk.
well, you say you've won. You've won in that you got the planning, but my God, it's cost you in terms of cost of holding for that
Oh God,
time period. And, obviously
mental
the
health,
the stress
still
that it's
recovering mentally from it.
I know.
But yeah, financially, it's going to take a couple of years to
Yeah,
actually, you know, recover. I think from
yeah.
that.
And again, entrepreneurship has been broken down, and we're not supporting it. We are not supporting productivity. We are just taking money from purses that don't have any money left, as in, the working class, the middle class.
Don't get me started on the government talking about the working families. It's like, what, do we not count as an entrepreneur? We don't work. Okay, that's a rant for another day.
It is a rant for another day. Okay, so we might not have come up with the solutions today, but I welcome programs like Panorama. It was broad brush, but at least it gets it out there. And I think that there was some good chat in there and some good initiatives. And if only we could just redesign our planning system to be a bit slicker and a bit more consistent, then I think we'd have a chance of getting halfway to that target of 1.5 million.
Yeah, look, it'd be a great start to clear that planning process up. And I think the government have to take responsibility and go, look, we have to bring this in-house. We have to commission builders who just do this, who build the houses that are needed, like social housing, 2 and 3 bed star homes and flats in the areas that they're needed.
Yeah, separate it out. Don't look to the private rental sector to fix the social housing problem, because it's not what we were designed for.
Cool. Great. Thanks, Sarah. It's always good to have a joint rant.
Absolutely.